I'd like to call to order the Finance Committee meeting for the City Council of Palo Alto for June 3rd, 2025. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Rectal.
Here.
Councilmember Lithcotty.
Here.
And Chair Burt.
Here. Okay, before proceeding to our three action items, we have an opportunity for members of the public to speak on any item that's not on the agenda but is within the purview of the committee. Do we have any speakers?
No public comments.
All right, we'll move right on to item one, which is Finance Committee discussion for the fire chief recruitment and input of the candidates' key characteristics. So, Sandra, are you presenting?
Good evening, Chair Burt. Yes, I am. Good evening, council members. Sandra Blanche, Human Resources Director.
Recording in progress.
With us this evening, we have Executive Recruiter Terry Black and Senior Recruiter Bill Weisgerber. He's a former fire chief. So this evening we'll be discussing the upcoming fire chief recruitment. The objective for this evening is to seek your input regarding the key candidate characteristics. We are preparing for the fire chief's retirement, which is coming up at the end of this year. We have an outlined recruitment plan that will take place over the next several months. And also wanted to be sure to inform you, as we stated in the memo of this evening, we have a website on the city page for community engagement and input. In addition to this evening's, although we didn't have anyone speak to this evening. So I've included the link here for the public. With this, Terry, would you like to proceed?
Great. Thank you so much, Sandra. Great to see our three council members this evening, and thank you for having us back for another executive recruitment. So we are really interested in getting your feedback. Bill and I have been speaking with other individuals in the organization to try to collect information on the candidate profile. So once again, if you've worked with us before, you know that we want to hear sort of your description of the perfect fire chief going forward. What qualities and characteristics make up that candidate profile? Those attributes that we should be particularly attentive to that in your mind are critical for success for the next fire chief.
That complete the presentation?
Yes, sorry. Sorry, open it up for your input, and we might ask follow-up questions based on your initial comments.
Okay. And do we have any members of the public who want to speak to this?
No public comment.
Okay, colleagues, who has first? Julie?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I know we all appreciate what a critical role this is, and the big shoes that will have to be filled by whomever succeeds Chief Blackshire. My questions range from sort of minutia to, or I guess questions and comments from big picture to small. I noted that in the packet, item 1, attachment A, the fire chief job description was revised July 2011, but this would reflect a job description that was not the one that Chief Blackshire was hired under, because he's been in the role for 6 years. So we're looking at like 2018, 2019. So I'm just wondering if what was given to us is a reflection of the current expectations, or if there's a document that superseded this that we should have been looking at.
I think the HR director will take that.
There is no more current job description. What we've included is reflects what's in the charter for the fire department director or chief in this case. We do have a posting that was used in 2019 that we would have developed in a similar process as this, seeking input from the stakeholders. And so with the input that we are gathering here, Terry will take all the input and create the job description, which will be relevant to some of the more, the current projects
Yeah.
and work in the department.
I guess my question is, wouldn't it be valuable for us to see kind of as a starting line, what are the standards the current chief was hired under and expected to uphold by way of qualifications and job duties? And not seeing that, I don't know whether the 2019 document is a substantial revision to the 2011 or not. But if it was substantial, then I sure would want to be looking at that instead of something that is from 2011.
Sure. Thank you for the question, council member. The research staff did back during that original, the recruitment you're referencing, it was a full recruitment, but it was done internally. So it didn't necessarily have the, kind of 6-page glossy brochure that perhaps we're used to seeing for some of our executive recruitments. And the job posting really was similar to what was in the job description, but obviously just more in summarized language, like the budget is X million dollars, there's this many staff. So I would say those are the only additional contextual pieces that were added at that time.
Okay.
I think we as staff can forward that or provide that as information, but I can assure the committee you aren't necessarily missing anything that I would say substantially would be different than what's in the current job description.
Okay, thank you for that. Going deeper now into that, there's something that just stood out as being odd to me. Under essential duties, providing bicycle licensing is listed as a duty. And it seems to me that I just was curious as to why that falls under fire to start with and why it would roll up under the chief's job.
I don't believe that that's a current duty for the fire department any longer.
Okay,
So
so
to
we're
your
sort of seeing
point-
an example of seeing the revised documents would be helpful.
yes,
Okay,
or to your point of that needs to be
Okay.
updated.
okay. Moving down to minimum qualifications, I have to say I was surprised at bullet 2 that only 5 years of experience in a major fire service function are required, with a requirement that 2 of those 5 years had been in a command position. It just feels not senior enough. I understand that's minimum. I understand we can desire higher, but I would love to better understand why the minimums would be set so low for a position so important.
There's no, looking at the prior posting, that is the experience for minimum qualifications. When we seek candidates, we do seek candidates that are the best qualified. And so not, these are just minimal entry requirements.
So we would be satisfied with with a fire chief that's had only 5 years of major fire service.
So I
function.
think that's a fair priority that the committee can articulate. So, right,
Okay.
these are minimums that based on the current job description, unless we change the job description, we would kind of, when you're reviewing candidates, be reviewing for compliance with these. But I do think, to Sandra's point, and at the committee's discretion, one of your feedback points could be, we would like that our ideal candidate has no less than X years of service. And, maybe Terry and Bill, you can provide some feedback on what you see kind of more broadly as you do these executive level recruitments. in terms of candidates' backgrounds and maybe something that might be not limiting, but express the gravitas of the role and expectations.
Yes, thank you, Kylie. So one of the reasons having the minimum calls at the level there are now is we can cast a wide net and be incredibly inclusive. But typically, we are not going to see very strong candidates without at least 10, 15 years of experience and probably a minimum of 5 years of command level experience, often greater than that, the stronger candidates that Bill will help us attract. With retirement, the retirement formulas being what they are, we are losing or have lost over the last 3 or 4 years a lot of talent out of public safety. So it will not hinder us. It will help us cast a wider net. But that doesn't mean you can dilute. You have to dilute your ideal candidate profile because we will seek to adhere to whatever that is. And I'd venture to say, being that it's Palo Alto, we're going to be looking for many more years of experience.
Yeah, I appreciate greatly the notion that retirement opportunities are, culling top talent out of the pool. So that's helpful. And I think it would reassure me to know, just looking at Chief Blackshire and the prior chief, who I believe was Eric Nickel, how many years of prior experience in a major fire service function and a command position each of them had, because we certainly wouldn't want to go backwards. Therefore, I think it'll serve us well to know kind of what the current one and the prior one had by way of these minimum or these, years of service qualifications. That may not be possible to get now, but I'd love to have that information at some point.
Councilmember, I know Chief Blackshire had about 20 years of experience in the fire service when he was appointed to be chief. I couldn't tell you how many of those were in a command position. I would need to research with staff what former Chief Nichols' experiences were.
Okay, thank you. And that's it for my technical questions. I have some thoughts about what we ought to consider, but I'm going to let my colleagues go with whatever technical points they have.
Yeah. First question is about internal versus external. Typically, not just in Palo Alto, but other cities too. Do they typically hire internal, or when you hire a new chief, does it usually come from the outside?
Terry, I think that might be a question for you and Bill in terms of what you see in the industry.
Outside of Palo Alto, in the industry.
Yeah.
I would say it's about 50-50. It ebbs and flows, but that's, probably a safe estimate. Maybe slightly more external these days because people in many organizations, they don't have the bench strength to promote somebody internally, so they have to go outside to get somebody to meet their qualifications. But I would say 50-50, 60-40, depending on what window we're looking at. Bill, would you?
Sure, I would agree with that. And even, there's just not like you said, there's not the bench depth there in a lot of places these days through attrition or just because the succession planning hasn't been that robust. But to kind of address the previous question about minimum quals, we're seeing fire chief candidates with 15 to 20 years in the fire service, 3 to 5+ years as in the command staff, if not more. So, and we do our diligence in trying to bring forward those most qualified candidates for the agency to consider, so that you have a really rich pool to select from.
Okay. And now we have both fire and ambulance. How does that affect our selection of the criteria of the candidates? Do many other fire departments have ambulances?
Well, no, if I could just speak to that real quick. Palo Alto is one of the few in California that has Health and Safety Code 201 rights, because they've been doing continuous paramedic transport since the 70s. And an agency has to be doing that. However, a lot of agencies are doing have engine-based paramedics, and they work hand in hand with the transport service. They're very involved with the transport service, and they also there's more and more agencies who are we're seeing have the single role paramedic service. Sac Metro has a single role paramedic service. Huntington Beach has a single role paramedic service. You see a lot of recruitments out there for single role paramedics for this type of thing, but it is based on the agency in California having 201 rights. We also see candidates from out of state who run EMS and paramedic programs with an ambulance transport component attached to that.
Okay. With regard to Julie's question about the 5 years, I thought that was a little light too. And I'm worried about if you spread the net too wide, you get a lot of candidates, but it also makes a lot more work and it's harder to really scrub them. And you may be throwing people out without really scrubbing their backgrounds. And so I would rather cast a medium-sized net and try to not be overly broad, because I think that may be, when you're doing superficial rejections, then you're not really doing anyone a favor. I think I'd rather be more selective in making that first round and do a better scrub on that. One other thing, the possession of a valid Class C driver's license in California is a requirement. And I guess if you're driving a truck, for fire chief, is that needed?
No.
Okay.
The apparatus engineer and operators are driving that with their Class B license.
Right.
And
The chief does have a take-home vehicle, so they do have and drive a city vehicle that
Okay.
is equipped for a certain level of response, meaning a certain type of lights and sirens. So obviously there are some general requirements to ensure that they can operate that vehicle.
Class C is what we all possess.
Correct.
That's regular
Correct.
drivers.
That's correct.
okay. And now the questions, what's your perfect candidate? I don't know. Do we want to get to that after a second round or?
Yeah, let's do second round.
Okay, go ahead then.
So first, thanks for the good questions from my colleagues. Starting with the driver's license, that effectively rules out out-of-state candidates. Why would we want to do that? If we want to say that they have to have a license within whatever time frame by the time they would start the job, or within whatever time frame, but I wouldn't think we want to rule out out-of-state candidates, right?
That's right. We
Correct.
wouldn't.
Okay. And then on this minimum experience, are you anyone here saying that we would consider hiring someone with only 5 years in fire and 2 years in leadership?
Try and say that one more way.
Would we actually hire someone with only 5 and 2 years of experience?
So if we had really strong candidates that still only had 5 years experience, would that be enough to,
Or 2 years in
or management? Yeah.
management?
I think it would be highly unlikely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know why we list something that, like Keith said, it just means we have a bigger pool of paperwork and we mislead candidates that they were being seriously considered when their experience was a disqualification, and yet they met the so-called minimum requirement. So I think we need to, this should come to the committee more fleshed out on a number of these things. We should have the 2019 posting, even if it was internal. We should have whatever you recommend as real experience minimum levels. And I don't know what those should be, but it doesn't sound like it's the 5 and 2. Shouldn't require a driver's license. So let's make sure that when it comes to the committee, there's been some good thought already, because I don't think those are things that should be reliant on the committee to come up with.
Sure, appreciate that, Chair. And I think you're actually hitting on really the intention behind this item, and bringing it in a public forum is both to create space for the public to engage on this topic if they so choose, to provide that feedback. And really what staff is looking for from the committee is focusing on feedback on that ideal candidate. When we write up that all of the information and feedback from the committee tonight is really going to go into what we draft as that ideal candidate, the desired
Right.
qualifications,
I
et cetera.
understand. We want to get into the substantive part of our feedback. We shouldn't be doing technical
Correct.
revisions. Okay. Julie?
And I do appreciate that, but we get a packet, we're expected to read it in its entirety. When we see things that don't make sense, I think we're not doing our due diligence, right? Now, I know you feel that way.
No, I agree with you. I just think these things should have already been fleshed out.
I get you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, to the substance. I know that Chief Blackshire is known for and proud of his work at recruitment, at doing his part to diversify the profession, both within his own department and within our state and nationally and even internationally. The first time I met him and went for an interview, a meeting, a get to know you in his office, he talked about that being his proudest work in the fire service. And he talked about, you know, his successes and that of his colleagues at bringing more women, particularly, as well as more people of color into the profession. And he says this is a problem the profession as a whole suffers from, but it is so beneficial when we show up at a crisis in somebody's life, when they see somebody that looks like them. And he said that's particularly true for women. When, you know, we're able to say we have a woman on our crew and can interact with that person in their crisis in a way that just offers a different perspective. And he speaks really compellingly and convincingly on that. Now, everyone pursues different passions within their careers and their professions. So I don't know how many out there are interested in diversifying a traditionally male and white profession, but it has been, I think, a hallmark for Chief Blackshire. And I'm not sure how transparent that is or how apparent that has been to people. So I want to put that out there as something that I'd like to see, that we would be attracting someone who is very aware that the profession needs more diversity for reasons that serve the end users, not just as a nod to DEI for the sake of it, but rather we can provide better service when we are a more diverse force. And I guess the other thing that I want to bring up is the PR issues, the communications issues that relate to fire. Two things come to mind, you know, the recent fires in Midtown and the fire over a year ago, maybe close to 2 years ago, and I can't remember, Bills and Phil's also in Midtown. The public has perceptions about our responsiveness and reliability and the extent to which the city as a whole and the fire department, you know, within the city is sort of taking these things seriously. When people drive by a burned out place that hasn't been updated, hasn't been worked on, renovated, rehabilitated, their perception is, and we know that it's just perception, yet perception is reality. You know, is the city doing enough? Does the city care enough? They don't realize that the property owner is dealing with an insurance situation, what have you. So it brings to mind, you know, how savvy is the chief with respect to communicating the story to the constituents? I don't know within our city hierarchy how often Chief Blackshire and his team are working with Megan Horgan Taylor and her team, or if they have their own communications within fire. But I think as the face of the fire department, it would be terrific to know that, you know, when we think of the big duties, protect the community, prevent things from protect when things happen, prevent so bad things don't happen, and then communicate, being that information resource for the public, for other city departments, industry, and the media. I read that line somewhere in here, and I just wanted to underscore that now more than ever, with the proliferation of information in so many different, forms, to have somebody who knows how to communicate in a way that is accurate and reassuring and timely, I think is a characteristic I would value. And that's it for me.
Okay. Yeah. You said the perfect candidate, and that's always dangerous. It's like asking me a perfect baseball player. I want to be able to hit for power, hit for average, run and throw. And so we can't expect that we're going to get a perfect candidate. What characteristics do we require that's absolutely necessary? I think the first thing that comes to mind is people skills. This person is going to be managing. He's not fighting fires directly. He's managing people. He's really a manager. And the ability to interact with people and handle people, and when people get mad, be able to calm them down and be able to convince people to do what he wants. That's a really important skill in this position. The second thing would be experience. And we talked earlier about the 5 years. One of the things when Darren Anderson was the head of parks, one of the things that made him great is he was a former ranger. And he knew exactly what these people were dealing with. And so both on a budgeting standpoint and also just relating to them, he could go talk to the ranger and they were talking the same language. And that made him very effective. And so be able to relate and understand what the people in the field are going through is important. And having that with people skills, I think those two things are just absolutely necessary. Now, does he need to be a big picture thinker? Does he need to be able to do, tactical? Those, in a perfect world, yes, but I think the people skills are number one. The ability to delegate. You don't want a micromanager because he can't micromanage. There's just too much stuff going on. And the ability to trust people and be able to pass down directions and have confidence that these people that he's selected are going to work. I think that's important. Now, strategic versus tactical. I think I would rather if I have to only take one of those, I think strategic, big picture thinking, and his second level in command, they're the ones that are going to be more tactical. And so if he's a big thinker that can delegate, and then the second level is able to take that direction and implement it, then I think that's a good mix. And so I don't think he has to be a micromanager. I don't think he has to be super organized, but I think he has to be able to relate with people and be able to communicate and get them to do a coherent strategy. Those are my thoughts.
Thanks. I appreciate those comments. So I agree that leadership skills, particularly within the department, are very important. Communication skills with the community are probably increasingly important in this department. And I do agree that maybe the way we should frame what we're looking for is not a perfect candidate, but what would be an outstanding candidate. I do think that that Chief Blackshire has done a great job on recruitment and really a full range of qualified people that come from diverse backgrounds. One of the things that I think we want to really bear in mind is diversity that also reflects our population, and particularly when we have large immigrant population groups, it is an advantage to have a good proportion of our staff from a similar background. And then emerging expectations of the leadership that position we now have a much higher focus on wildfire prevention and response. And that's an area that in an urban fire department is not usually thought of as being critical, but we have half of our geographic area in highly dangerous wildlands. And it could eventually be the most significant emergency the city has ever faced. And so having a candidate with some orientation there would be valuable. Part of that is technology innovation. It's an area where we're particularly on the prevention and detection. There are rapidly emerging, really advantageous technologies that we need to embrace, and our department, both the chief and others, have been moving aggressively on, and that's something that I think will continue to become more and more important. And then finally, a lot of that, particularly in the wildland, is dependent on interagency collaboration, both in the prevention and the training. We have tomorrow, we're going to go witness a county wildfire burn, a controlled burn. And I don't know the last time we did that. And that's a new focus and a really important one. But collaborating, kind of having a big vision of all the agencies. You know, a few years ago, we started collaborating more with the agencies in our county, and yet we're on the border of San Mateo County. And now we collaborate with the agencies in San Mateo County as well. So I think that's another real key area that will be a priority for the chief. You know, whether that chief comes in with all that experience or has an aptitude and orientation toward it. Ideally, they come in with all of it, but at a minimum, we want to see that they understand the criticality of that, and have the abilities and orientation to really embrace those needs aggressively. I did have one other question. I think with this recruitment, we have the advantage of Chief Blackshire gave us a lot of notice, and it looks like we're going to have, I forget the timing, but it's in short order that we're going to have, what do we say? I forget. Open the recruitment by the beginning of July, so within a month. And then how long are we expecting to do the recruitment, and how long before we hope to have the replacement on board? And given that the chief gave us so much time, would we bring the replacement on board simultaneously with still having Chief Blackshire here for the value of transition?
So go ahead, Kylie.
I was just going to pass it to you, Terry.
So the recruitment will be open for about a month as we try to attract interest. So 4 to 5 weeks typically. This screening interview process, the final interview process, will take about a month during the summer. So I would think the city manager and council are in a position to identify the top candidate by the first half of September. And then background, if it's an external candidate, they would have to go through background check and the due diligence that we partner with the city on. So they could conceivably start as early as October if they were coming from the outside. If it's an internal candidate, that's obviously a more seamless and quicker transition. If they have to relocate, that could add 4 to 6 weeks onto it. So, you know, I would say in the fall, definitely. And whether there needs to be some transition with Geo still in their role, those are usually decisions. It's rare that happens, but it's normally a decision based on a discussion between the city manager and the candidate identified, and what they think they need to be successful.
Of course, it's not rare if it's an internal candidate.
That's correct.
Yeah, so it's only the external candidate who's at that disadvantage for the department. I mean, of not having that benefit of having the transfer and overlap with the chief. So I would suggest that if we ended up with an external candidate, that we deliberately actually invest in that. I think there's a real value in it. Having run a company when I had those few times where I had a lot of advance notice, it was so valuable to be able to have that overlap. You usually don't get it for an external hire, but when we got it, it was really appreciated. Okay.
You said, I hear you that this is the planned timeframe, and I just find myself feeling skeptical about what can be accomplished in July. Obviously, this is what y'all do as recruiters, you know best. It feels like a very accelerated, optimistic timetable for me, given where we are as a finance committee giving feedback on the documents that will ultimately be put out there. I'm just pushing back. You're feeling confident this is the right timeframe? Assuming it's an external, right, it speaks more to the people who don't know about this role, the people who don't know we have a vacancy coming, all of those people in the external world, we're trying to make aware of this opportunity and provide sufficient, time for the interviewing and so on. This timeframe feels like it's not too optimistic to you?
At this juncture, no. As long as we can get a healthy 4 or 5 weeks of open recruitment time, we may run into snags here and there due to candidate vacations, and we'll just have to work around and stay nimble, which is, why it's so nice to have the luxury of a advance notice that Gio's been gracious enough to give. It's what we're going to shoot for. A lot of people, if it is an external candidate and they do end up having to relocate, those transitions are easier end of summer, like before school starts, or like around August, September-ish, or at the end of the year. So we're trying to hit this kind of sweet spot. Speaking of no perfect candidate, there's also no perfect time to recruit either. So, but as long as we have 4 or 5 weeks, we can reach a very good, strong audience. Technology helps us these days, and being in business a long time and having lots of cell numbers, that also helps.
All right. Do we have any other feedback? All right.
I did just want to circle back to Councilmember Haynes' question about Chief Blackshire's background. He was in a command position for 9 years, promoted from a battalion chief to deputy chief.
So that just underscores our collective concern that the minimums are set too low. Yeah,
And
thank you.
I don't recall Chief Nichols how extensive, but it was extensive. Yeah.
He had 4 years, I looked it up as we were talking. He had 4 years as a battalion chief and a little over 5 years as a deputy chief before he joined Palo Alto.
Okay, thanks. All right. Thank you very much and good luck to you.
Thank you
Thank you for your comments.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Our next item is a recommendation to the council to approve the new FY26 Palo Alto fiber rates and packages as recommended by the UAC. Good evening.
All right, so we have Dave Yoon from our utilities department, as well as Darren Nemoto from the IT department to help navigate this. I'm not sure who's going to kick it off. Dave?
Sure. Good evening, council members. I'm glad to be here. Sorry it's taking us a little bit longer than we had wanted to come and present the fiber to the premise rates. So the good news is we're about to launch, and tonight we're hoping to get your approval to start offering this internet service from the city. And with me is Darren Nemoto. He's been a key champion in this project as well. He is, of course, the Chief Technology Officer, the CIO. He can speak a little about his background, how it relates back to this project, if you want to.
Sure, thank you. And, as well as being the CIO IT director for the city, and previous, I have worked for ISP providers in the past and done other stints, but this was a little back in the day when technology wasn't as advanced as today, but process is still the same and requirements are have increased, but overall, just the understanding of what it takes to provide a service like this, and the understanding of the infrastructure required to provide the internet services. So, and that's where my role is really helping with the operations and getting the infrastructure that serves the internet to our customers in play, and working in partnership with the utilities department to lay that foundation of the utility infrastructure, the fiber infrastructure. So.
I also want to add that this is not just utilities and IT. This is a whole citywide project. We've had help from ASD, HR, Public Works, planning, legal. So I want to thank everyone who's been involved in getting this business up and running. So, all right, so let's get to this. So tonight we will be presenting the fiber rates and the proposed, and also some financial updates of FTTP or fiber to the premises. Oh, there is someone raising their hand. Is there a public comment or is that later?
Go right ahead.
Okay, sorry. So for the agenda tonight, we'll provide a brief overview of the council approved priorities or projects. We'll share the results of a competitive scan of the pilot area performed by a consultant. Then we'll go over some of the financials of FTTP, the rate structure, and the proposed product offerings. Then we'll wrap it up with some key measures of success for both the pilot and phase one, and some upcoming milestones. Next slide, please. So in December of 2022, I think Chair Burt was one of the council members there. I think also Councilmember Stone, or the other one. I looked at the roster back then to see who was still around and how this all came about. So they did approve of a fiber expansion plan utilizing the $34 million of fiber reserves we had accumulated over the 20 years. The first one is the fiber backbone rebuild. The plan is the existing backbone is about 30 years old and has served the city well and has built up over 30 million in reserves from dark fiber licensing. It's time to reinvest in this new fiber backbone and also create a second fiber backbone for the electric utility. And this will provide additional capacity and security for our future and current needs. The dark fiber business is gradually making a comeback since the pandemic, including new connection in the foothills to serve about 20 customers who didn't have many options to reliable internet service. So we partnered with Adobe Creek Networks and we provided them the dark fiber licensing, and they're going to be the ISP provider for that area. So they've been working for that, I think, for several years. So we finally found a plan that worked for both of us as we were redoing the fiber rebuild in the foothills. The second project council approved was spend up to maybe $20 million from the fiber reserves for a phase build out of fiber to the premises. The pilot is a subset of the phase one, consisting about 1,000 customers in the pilot, and the goal is to get about 7,000 customers in the full phase one. We will be returning back to the UAC and the council after the pilot with data points, financials, and metrics of success to determine the financial sustainability of this new business. And finally, we're also aligning the fiber to the premise construction with grid mod to increase efficiency, reduce construction costs, and minimize disruption in neighborhoods. And so far, that has been going well so far. We've had minimal complaints, knock on wood, for the first 1,000 customers in that pilot area. So we're trying to go in there once, do all the pole make ready for the grid mod, and then we'll come back maybe in the summer and do the fiber lashing, which should be quick. Next slide. This is kind of a coverage map of our competitive landscape. So here, let me orient you. The red dots here represent Xfinity, where they offer 2 gig services. So it's about 50% of the pilot area. They have 2 gig service available to their customers. And the blue balloons are the AT&T, where they offer fiber to the home service. So there are a lot of blues underneath the red, just so you know. I think Comcast about 50% has 2 gig service or more, or 2 gig service, whereas AT&T probably has like 98% fiber to the home service. The difference between, I guess, Comcast and us is that they offer non-symmetrical speed. So their upload speed and download speed vary quite a bit. So even though they may offer 2 gig of download speed, their upload speed is probably like 300 megabytes. So 1/7 of the time. Whereas with fiber, it's a symmetrical speed. So we will upload and download at the same amount of speed. Any question on the slide before I move on?
The red boxes that you have highlighted and the yellow ones.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
So yes, the yellow boxes are the ones, again, I think for the pilot, we are going to be offering either the 1 gig and the 5 gig. I think the yellow boxes are showing where they are offering more than 1 gigabit service. So that's the red balloons again for Xfinity and the blue balloons for AT&T. So that's who we're really competing with in regards to technology and speed. And then the red boxes, those are the kind of the two offerings we want to offer in the beginning, just to keep it simple and make it easier for us also to learn from it. The 1 gigabit service and the 5 gigabit service. So as you can see, Xfinity doesn't have a 5 gig. They only have a 1 gig and a 2 gig, whereas AT&T has both.
So you said a 2 gig, but it says 1.2.
Yes, they have a 2.0, the one in the green box, sorry, in the yellow box.
Oh, I see it.
Yeah.
Okay, I get it. Thank you.
Yeah. So the 1.2 gigs, they have that in download, but their upload speed, I think, is like 35 or something. So it's really very slow to upload anything.
So can you just explain the two different Xfinity $80, one that has 1.2 gigs and the other that's the 2?
So only certain areas have the 2 gigs available. They're pricing the same, but the other areas of the 1.2, I don't think they're planning on upgrading it. So those customers are kind of, that's what they're limited to, well, at least from Xfinity. But AT&T is there if they choose.
And can I ask, so we've chosen an area, and I realize this is the area,
Mhm.
but just for me to understand why, where there already is fiber coverage
Mhm.
offered by one or both competitors.
Mhm.
And we're choosing to go in there and compete there instead of doing our pilot fiber in a place where people don't yet have any fiber.
It's a good question. So two reasons for that, I guess. One is because we were trying to coordinate with GridMod. So this is where they were starting to build for the 4 kV, 12 kV conversion, and we're trying to learn from the pilot. So that's one of the reasons. And the second reason is for where I think AT&T is probably at 75% of the city, and the areas that they're not at is probably the underground areas. And the cost to build in the underground is a lot more expensive than the overhead. So and I think it's almost like, I want to say 10x the expense to build in the underground areas.
And is there another reason, if I recall correctly, which is that this pilot, we really want to understand the uptake and the pricing.
Mhm.
And if we put it where there wasn't fiber, we wouldn't get that comparison.
Right. That's right.
Our competitive.
I confess, I live in a part of the city where I have to have both AT&T and Xfinity broadband
Mhm.
because neither has a great speed,
Okay.
and we're just waiting for like better technology to arrive.
Hopefully we'll
But
get there
that's
soon.
just where I happen to live. All right,
Okay.
thank you.
Sure. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is kind of how Xfinity and AT&T get new customers or have customers churn. They do offer these promotional rates, and also now they're enticing customers with gift cards, as you can see here. So they'll start off like the 1 gig service with a $55 promotion rate, but after a year or two, they'll raise it to $95 or $114, depending on which service provider. So for Palo Alto Fiber, we're going to offer one rate and we're going to stick with that rate. So we're not going to have any of these hidden fees or these ballooning rates, unlike our competitors. We also don't have the deep pockets to compete with them in pricing, underpricing, and offering gift cards. So the way we're going to differentiate ourselves is really through our service, the quality of the speed of the product, and our responsiveness, and also their trust in the city. Just same as all our utility services and all the other city services we provide. We're going to differentiate by that versus trying to beat them on price or technology.
Jump in on this because I think this is one of the most important questions. When all our other utilities, we are a monopoly for the most part.
Mhm.
This we're competing.
Yes.
And so when we say, well, this is how we do it when we're a monopoly, that doesn't necessarily apply to when we're not a monopoly. And I don't know the answer to what we really want is to get the uptake of hit our minimum threshold on subscribers. Has there been any consideration that we try two different models in the pilot area and see which works best?
Yeah, we have considered that. That's why the way we're proposing the rate tonight, it gives that flexibility. We're just proposing an up to rate, but we can have the flexibility to offer promotional rates in between.
Oh, because I thought you said we are not using promotional rates.
We're not going to undercut them. We'll have lower rates, but We can't keep going under them whenever they
Okay,
lower their
so we may
price.
have promotional rates, but
Sorry.
not necessarily lower promotional rates than them.
Right.
Got it.
Sorry about that. Yes.
Okay, thanks.
And if I just could comment on the difference between utilities, right, and us competing, it's really, we're here in the community, we're local, and that's really the message that we have to send, right? When you have a problem, just like with utilities, we're going to be there to respond. We have local presence, so if you're having troubles at your home, we can get people over there quickly, right? And that's really our only key differentiation we have. We're not going to compete on technology, price, or marketing with the big guys, right? So really, our primary goal is to invest in the community and offer reliable, affordable internet for the entire community. And that's really our messaging.
Well, I would add that we're not going to do bait and switch, and the private sector may. So that trust that we are going to charge according to our costs and other transparent factors, I think for a lot of residents who have gone through this unreliability, both of the product unreliability or the pricing unreliability, I think both of those are things that may appeal, but we don't know how appealing that is going to be to the customer base. So I want to make sure that we're keeping open that ability to adapt and not just sequentially adapt, but maybe we start out trying two different models, and any of us can take a good educated guess on which of those would be best, but the proof's in the pudding.
Right. We're definitely going with our eyes wide open, and we're going to try different things during this pilot to try and make this as successful as possible.
Thanks.
Okay, next slide, please. Sorry. And then here are some expenses. So for the pilot, this is kind of what we're estimating the costs for the first 1,000 customers. It's about $4.5 million, but half of that is about one-time cost. So the ongoing cost is about half of that. The labor, hanging the messengers on the poles, the construction, which will probably begin in the September, October timeframe. Actually, it should begin in the July timeframe, my bad, for the fiber construction. And then the purchasing of materials, and then the hut we're trying to get the permit for right now. Once that gets approved, we can begin the pad mount and the paving of that area and putting in the substructural work. And the hut is already built, but it's just waiting for delivery now.
Well, we've been waiting for the hut for some time.
Right.
Why is there a permitting hold now?
So we did have to go through the proper permitting channel like everyone else. And then when they looked at the flood zone or the flood plain and the FEMA, I think they required a certain level. It was like 12 feet had to be above a certain level. And I think our current
12 feet?
Yeah,
above?
to be above because it's near the floodplain area, I think.
Yeah.
So I think our engineers have built it like 10 or 11 feet. So I think we have to go back and add another feet right now is what we're working on to get the permit approved.
Okay, but it kind of goes to one of these questions on a lot of our the work we do as a city is what things should we be doing in parallel more rather than sequence? And we've been the hut's quite a bit delayed, right? So it's kind of baffling that once the hut's finally arriving, we're still waiting on the permit. I don't understand why the permitting wouldn't have been done upstream.
Yeah, we didn't have the final engineering design until the hut was fully built out and all the weight structures were all calculated. So
Well, it's that customized. We didn't know some of the key data.
Right.
Okay.
That part is sequential, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And then what else? Oh, then I want to also highlight the overhead and underground construction costs. As you can see, like the overhead costs is substantially a lot less. I think the underground's almost like more than 10 times as much as the overhead costs, roughly, based on footage. And right now, the cost per passing, including the one-time cost, is about $5,500 per customer passed. But with excluding the one-time cost, it's about $2,100, $2,200. And our goal is to get down to like $1,500 as we build it out into phase one, as we learn from this pilot as we have more volume to bid out.
So the undergrounding is really fascinating in that, we've had all this debate over time. Do we underground electric utilities or not? And in this case, as well as I think in the grid mod, we're seeing that undergrounded utilities are more expensive to operate or to upgrade, I guess is what the truth is. And I think that's something we just want to make sure that the community and the council understands when in the context of every time we have that discussion on undergrounding. Yeah.
And this is another reason why we want to align with the grid mod project. So when we do the undergrounding, we'll do it together.
Yeah.
Share those
Thank
costs.
you.
The concept of undergrounding is very advantageous, right? People live, I want to get rid of those wires, but it is expensive.
Yes. It's also harder to troubleshoot when there is an outage. So you can't visually see, inspect. So then you go from box to box to find out where the outage is.
So
Well,
is that difficulty in troubleshooting something that we can translate to explain to the public that reliability or resiliency is reduced with undergrounded utilities?
I think in the past I would say true, but now with AMI and other automation, distributed energy stuff, we can probably detect faster than before. So before it was a very manual process now.
I
And
see.
now I think we have more technology.
So that difference is narrowed then. Okay, thanks.
Next slide, please. Now this is the operating expense that we built into the model. So the annual working capital is about 1.6 million. This includes a very thin, lean team. I think there's like 2 FTEs. So I think council authorized 4 FTEs to help with this fiber to the premise deployment. Thus far, we've only hired 1 full-time person. So it's been everyone else pitching in, helping out, like Darren himself. And so we just kind of working as a team to get this up and running, at least for the pilot. So it is a kind of a skeleton crew, but we believe we can still do it successfully. And so in the part of this model, there are variable costs such as help desk support, installations, and also sales, marketing, and the router, the home devices. So as we get more subscribers, some of those costs will go up as well. But that's kind of the operating expense we're estimating per year right now. Next slide, please. And then here is the proposed rates and product offerings. So for a 500 meg service, we're asking to price up to $30 for those who are on the rate assistance program and up to $75 for who those are not. But the ones we're going to really focus on in the pilot is the 1 gig and the 5 gig. So the 1 gig is up to 95 and the 5 gig is up to 265. Both of these rates are very competitive with the incumbents, but our plan is not to, of course, charge at the highest rate, but at least it'll give us the flexibility to offer promotional rates and also not disclose how much we're charging, I guess, to the incumbents as well. So we're trying to, but with this up to structure, we believe we'll have that flexibility to offer those promotional rates that you referred to earlier. Chair Burke.
Why do the faster rates there not include the router?
I think the consultant recommended because they cost more. And so I think they said you should probably pass some of the costs back to the customers if they really want the higher speed. And that was the reason why.
It'll be less price sensitive if they really want the performance.
Right.
Okay.
And then the next slide, please. And then we're also offering some other services. Maybe you can speak to these with more than me.
Yeah.
Sure.
Sure. A lot of these services, as Chair Burt mentioned, gives us some flexibility to add on ancillary services to our offerings to help entice people to move over. And such as fixed wireless, we are investigating some fixed wireless opportunities. And Chair Burt, I think you were part of a Toronto wireless demo many years ago, right? So those are potentially some other offerings that we can add as well, which includes, which will help reduce cost of deployments because you don't have to worry about fiber, but the speeds are reduced as well. So, and a lot of these Protect IQ, Experience IQ is a part of the offering that our provider offers through their service. So things that like Protect IQ is security, Experience IQ helps with the home Wi-Fi and managing those devices and so forth. So again, these are ancillary services that are included with our subscription to our hardware provider.
And as part of the promotion, we might be able to bundle some of these in with them as well, if depending on their level of interest. So that's something we'll consider.
I hadn't appreciated that it's not an either or. So can you explain that a little more on how that might work? Say if we had the moderately high speed wireless capability, how does that integrate with this program?
So we are looking at betaing that in the future, right? And whoops, I'm sorry. So basically, it could be offered as a service where, as Dave mentioned, where areas where it's very expensive for fiber, and to give them an intermediate option for higher speed or more reliable internet, as well as potentially for businesses as a backup route or some other ancillary service. So there's a lot of different potentials for it if it's proofed out properly.
And I recall the discussion about, our nodes. Is that higher speed wireless dependent on the node, or does it have such a greater travel distance that we don't need all those nodes to be able to offer that?
I would say we'll still need nodes out there, depending on the canopy coverage and the interference to offer better, higher speeds and more reliable service. But it does help with the technology we're investigating. It does help with the amount of nodes that we need. So estimate we might need, four nodes to cover the entire city versus some others, right? So
yeah, we had a lot more nodes that we were thinking as the network, right? For and I haven't been keeping track, but for instance, Tirana, by example, because that's when we did the demo with. My understanding is they've come out with a couple generations of products since then. How fast are they now?
A lot of it depends on coverage and distance, but they can achieve. We've seen them be able to achieve up to 700 download and maybe half of that upload. So it is still not as equivalent to fiber, but it offers an option for others.
And is it a whole lot cheaper or just moderately?
In terms of the initial build, a whole lot, because you're not building fiber all the way to the premise or building the backhaul to serve that. So and the equipment is not as expensive. So yes, it's substantial difference.
I was just thinking about that pricing structure.
Yep.
And I just don't know how that would compare if when we look at Xfinity's offerings, they're not that fast. And so that sounds moderately close to their offerings. Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
And then we did some sensitivity analysis here and some modeling. So this first one is about take rate. So the take rate is a key metric to find out if business will be financially sustainable. And based on our modeling, I think we need about 27 to 30% take rate of subscribers from AT&T and Xfinity to at least break even for operational costs. I think based on the survey that Magellan did back in 2022, they were projecting anywhere from 35 to 40%. So, but to get to 27 or 30%, I think we would be okay. And then this shows kind of the how long will it take to break even, I guess, operationally. I think by the fourth year in most of these models, you'll probably break. Actually, on the take rate, sorry, that's the next slide. Under take rate, anywhere below 20, below 25, it probably won't break even. We'll probably need some sort of funding from the dark fiber fund or somewhere else to keep it going. But once we hit the 30% mark, then we should be able to break even, we believe, after the fourth year.
So the numbers that are in the 2029 column, those are just basically you're just operating expenses at that point?
Yes.
Okay, so
And one important thing to note also, besides take rate, is the speed to the market. So even though we have a high take rate, if we don't have enough subscribers, we won't ever cover our base expenses. So I think we need I think in this model, about 2,200 customers at minimum to start, or about 2,000 customers or so to at least start breaking even.
how much of your fixed costs are just fixed and how much of them are per customer?
If we can go back a few slides earlier, we can look at that. This one, yeah. So the one that says variable, that's a sub to the right. Those are the variable costs. So I would probably say if I had to guesstimate here, probably 85% would be fixed. I'm had to guess.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's a big
Yeah.
lever arm there. If you don't get the people, you're not going to break even.
Right. So with the pilot, we're gonna try and knock on every door, do everything we can to promote it.
On that, slide 10,
Uh-huh.
that, it's a percentage, but is that for the pilot area or citywide?
This is for phase one. I used it.
Phase one, yeah.
Up to 7,500 passings. I think the pilot's 1,000. So for the year FY26 is for just the pilot, and then beginning in 27 on is when we start building out phase one. Is the assumption here. So it'll ramp up until 2029 when it's fully built out for phase one. And the next slide, please.
And one question about that still, the net income, that includes construction costs.
Does not. This
Does
is
not.
for operational.
Really? So we're losing, like on the top left there,
Mhm.
we're losing 1.7 million in the first year just for operational costs.
Right. Because a lot of it is fixed costs for staff, for getting the data center stood up, and for the material, not the material, but the data center and the staff and the equipment.
Okay, and we only have 186 subscribers.
Because we're assuming a slow ramp up as we learn. I think
Might be helpful to describe the phases and how many homes we're passing during each phase.
Sure. So the pilot phase is about 1,000 customers, which is already identified. And for phase one, I think, depending on the cost per passing, we're hoping to add another 6,500 customers. So a total of 7,500 customers in passings. Oh, sorry. So yeah, and then for phase one, I think we're assuming a 2-year to 3-year build out. But we also have levers to slow down or speed up depending on the take rate too. So we'll depend on our strategic partners. We'll have to hire installers and whatnot, and also people to help as we get more subscription. Right now, we're just putting down the infrastructure, putting down our systems and building those up. But we will have the ability to scale up as needed.
So if I look at the top box between the 2027 and 2028, you have about the same number of subscribers, but a lot more revenue. What's going on there?
Subscribers 2027, 2028,
Yeah.
300. So I think it will depend on the ramp up. So maybe a lot of them ramped up in the beginning of 28, whereas the 1191 they mostly ramped up
It's not-
at the end. It's
Okay.
not.
It's not full.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
That revenue, is that just the incremental revenue for those additional customers? It's not the cumulative revenue, right?
It's the revenue for that year for those customers.
The incremental increase in revenue.
Yes, per year.
No.
The annual revenue, I guess I would call it. Total revenue per
Total revenue for all.
Oh, it is the total.
per
Okay.
year.
I see. So it's FY28, we've fully subscribed. You're just then projecting
Mhm.
the revenue. I got it. Sorry. Okay.
And then the next slide shows the pricing depending on if we use a lower end, middle end, or higher end pricing based on those different rates we talked about earlier. With the lower end, it's going to take a little longer to break even. As you, of course, increase the prices, then the sooner you break even. But there is a little flaw in this model. We don't have price elasticity as a variable. So we're assuming a fixed number of customers in each of the pricing sides. We want to disclose that. So, but I think, yeah. So, but regardless, I think all three does show profitability or break even. I won't say profitability, at least break even for the net operating costs by the 4th year. I think when Magellan did the model, it was closer to like 10 years. So I think we have scaled back a lot of the expenses. We haven't hired the FTEs that they had originally suggested just to try to keep it lean. Any questions on this slide? Okay. And then here's the cash flow projection. So we were authorized to spend up to 20 million from the fiber reserves. So again, we had 34 million originally. I think we still have about 31 million as of today, even though we spent a few already on construction.
And we had 34, but we've added to that, right?
Yes.
So what has it would it have grown to absent what we've spent?
We've probably spent about 2.5 million, more than that probably on this project so far. It's probably 3 million at least. So been, well, 34, I guess, still because of staffing, I guess, in a way. Because our dark fiber revenue hasn't gone up as fast as it was before.
I guess another way to put it is, what is the income from the dark fiber the last 3 years, I guess?
Well, last year, I think it was 1.5 million. And this year, I think we're projected about the same.
Okay, thanks.
But some of that revenue is also from interest return from the reserves.
Got it.
So,
Okay.
So even if we have, assuming we have 20 million to start with, and then here we walk down this table, the capital expenses, we'll take out 4.5 million. The first year working capital costs for operations brings us down to 13 million. And then if we do invest 10 million in phase 1 construction, we still have enough to cover the next couple years before we break even, is what it's showing here. And this is assuming, I think, a mid-level or low-level pricing even. So this is kind of the more the conservative model. So even by year 3, end of year 3, we still should have some money remaining from the 20 million seed money. And then on the bottom line, just show some additional funding sources that we have in fiber. So we only use 20 of the reserves. We also set aside 13 million for the new fiber backbone. And then we're also getting, I'm being conservative here as well, on the 300,000 annual net income, depending on how much interest we're going to receive in the future. So I would say anywhere to 300,000 to 500,000 would be conservative.
Yeah, given that we're 1.5 million now, including interest.
Mhm.
And the interest is what portion of that about?
Of the net income, I think we got like 700,000 last year, I want to say.
700,000. Oh,
Yeah.
so almost half of our revenue is from the interest.
Right.
So we're going to have a third the interest, and up until we spend on the new backbone.
Mhm.
So based on current rates, we get about 1 million a year.
Mhm.
And yeah, so yours is very conservative. And I guess that difference, and maybe we should put it as a range, because
Mhm.
really you're being real conservative. You've got some unknowns on uptake and things like that. So there's an importance to having a fudge in there.
Mhm.
But we also want to know what is our best estimate of projected income from the existing dark fiber.
Mhm. Okay, can do that. Thanks. Next slide. And then some measures of success, at least for the pilot, it's more about operational success, customer service, customer feedback, of course, reliability and speed that we're going to be offering. Make sure we're hitting those marks and that achieve above. And then I think we'll just be also conservative on the take rate of 20%. We don't have a big marketing team built into the first pilot. Marketing is expensive. I think the most effective marketing campaign would be door to door. So we have gotten some pricing on that, and I think that's more for phase 1 than for the pilot area. And then for the phase 1 measures would be reducing the construction costs from that 2,200 per passing down to 15, finding some strategic partners with the installations and customer service maybe, and then make sure it's financially sustainable really at the end of the day and customers are happy.
Can you talk a little more about the potential on the strategic partnerships?
Yeah, so we are looking for, instead of adding more FTEs, like what the original models had said, I think it was projected up to 22 FTEs with the hire. I think we would want to outsource some of that in the beginning. So, and then based it, depending on the contract terms, based on maybe subscribers instead of fixed costs. And then make sure they have the bench available to help us scale up. So we are issuing RFPs right now to see how many vendors we can get. And we're trying to get more than one vendor for each of the services, just so we have a backup ready and then test out different things.
And these vendors, who are they working for now?
They probably work for AT&T, Xfinity as well.
So they use vendors
Yeah.
as well.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
And I think last slide, these are some of the upcoming milestones still. I think the grid mod pilot's already done, I want to say, or if not done, it's going to be soon done. We are ordering materials in June. Like I said, the fiber hut is delayed by the permit, but it is built and ready. And then we are putting up the systems and starting the marketing. We're starting to develop that marketing strategy, and hopefully we'll start publicizing some of that as we get closer. And then there are some compliance and regulatory things we have to abide by as well, which we're creating right now, like the agreements, the policies, and making sure all these disclosures are available to the customers when they sign up. And I think that is it.
And Dave, might you just, before we turn it back to the committee and public comment, I perhaps summarize in a few sentences what UAC's feedback was on this, since ultimately this is a recommendation from the Utilities Commission. I think it might be helpful for the committee to understand their dialogue.
Sure, definitely. So so the UAC did really approve of the rate structure and the fact that we have the flexibility to offer promotional rates to attract customers. The one thing they did ask us to do is come back to them during the pilot with metrics and data points to see how it's doing before we start phase one construction. So that was their biggest ask, is don't continue phase one until you guys find out how you're doing the pilot and get some of those data. So, and I think we're able to do that. If that's part of council and UAC's request, we can definitely do that.
We go to the public.
We have one public comment from Yustaf G. Give me one moment. Yustaf, go ahead.
Oh, hi. Members of the Finance Committee, my name is Utsav Gupta. While I currently serve as a commissioner on the Utilities Advisory Commission, the views expressed here are my personal comments and do not reflect the position or opinions of the commission. I'm here today to speak in support of the proposed fiber rates. Residential fiber is a sound strategy that invests our dedicated fiber fund directly back into Palo Alto residents. Internet service is the utility of our day. It's as essential as power or water. And despite being the birthplace of Silicon Valley, Palo Alto has lagged in providing modern internet service. This expansion before you today strategically aligns with grid modernization and crucial fiber backbone upgrades, making it both a prudent use of our fiber fund and a logical step forward. This is an excellent and the legally certain way to return the surplus fiber funds, which, as you had discussed, had reached 34 million by 2022, and it puts those funds directly back to our residents. This also addresses the need to invest in our fiber backbone, which has reached capacity, and it composes a large amount of the cost. Beyond the infrastructure, this project is projected to save our community 15 million in internet spending over just 10 years, with all fees staying local. And remember, this is a utility. The fiber plant payback is measured in decades. Even if it takes as long as 20 years to pay back, the fiber plant lifespan is 40 years, and I don't think it's going to take 20 years to pay it back. The need is clear. The only legally accountable data from the FCC estimates that at most 45% of Palo Alto residents currently have access to fiber. And even this number is likely inflated. I'm not sure where the 72 or 75% figure comes from. But again, the only legally accountable data is that only 45% of Palo Alto residents have access to fiber. Financially, this project is structured for sustainability. As you saw in the slides, we're expecting a take rate of 37 to 42%, well above the roughly 30% needed for the network to recover its costs. And again, the proposed rates are maximums designed to provide our staff flexibility to test different pricing strategies and ensure Palo Alto fiber is competitively priced. So in sum, expanding Palo Alto's fiber services to homes is a smart, legally sound way to invest existing funds back into our residents and businesses, and it saves them millions of dollars in service costs while providing superior modern internet And that's a rare win-win-win. Thank you again for your service to our community.
That concludes public comments.
Great. And so additional comments or questions? Julie? No? Lee?
Jump in if you have questions or you want to follow up. You mentioned about weird offering symmetric speeds, whereas Xfinity is quite often doing non-symmetric. What's the demand for symmetric? Will people be willing to pay a premium for symmetric speed?
Yeah, I think that's one of the big differentiator with fiber. I think a lot of people can't upload things when they want to with asymmetrical speed. They use hybrid fiber coaxial. I think that's what Comcast uses. So it is a much inferior product than fiber. So I think with the streaming nowadays and all the other activities people are using the internet for, there is more demand for faster upload speed, I guess.
What kind of user would need the faster upload? Like, is it gamers or what would be the?
Yeah, the target audience is, of course, a lot of people have transitioned to streaming, right? And again, if you have kids, you know that every device they're streaming multiple things on or gaming. So the need for bandwidth is definitely there. But also,
wouldn't that just be download mostly?
sometimes gaming and other things, do require, like if they're uploading a lot of videos or something, those require upload speeds as well. But overall, Comcast, in terms of technology as well, fiber provides a more consistent experience versus cable, which is a shared medium, right? So people who come home after work, they experience a little slower in that shared medium, right? So again, and reliability is another area because of, as we all know, the copper infrastructure in our environments are aging as well. So,
and so the ability for us to do symmetric is purely the fact that we have fiber. If we didn't want to offer symmetric, does that buy us anything? Could we don't get extra bandwidth or anything?
You'd still have to install new infrastructure, whatever, and fiber is the most common
so
now.
It's just a benefit that we get with no extra cost or no.
And it also future-proofs us for future expansion for other services. As we know, technology is advancing at, enormous speed. So again, it sets us up for future needs as well, offering fiber.
Our latency in Palo Alto will be much lower than AT&T or Xfinity just because PAX or the Equinix, our data center, is right next to us. So we don't have to transfer our wires or our data from state to state or county to county. It just goes here and out to the internet. So that is another advantage of building in Palo Alto.
And I'm quickly becoming a dinosaur because I have both a landline and cable TV. And yes, and my kids don't have either one of those. But yes. But there will be some old folks like me that want both the landline and or cable TV. In the past, you talked about having some partner that you wouldn't be providing that, but some third party you would arrange with. So if someone comes and says, I want cable TV and internet, you would be able to refer them in one-stop shop still.
We have seen some of those models. We haven't explored it yet, but there's enough interest. We would definitely look into it. But yes, it's potential.
Okay. And it wouldn't be so much a revenue source, but just that's one reason people may not sign up is they say, oh, I still want to have cable TV. So I think that's something that we should be at least keeping our ears open during this trial. And because, when you're trying to get take up, when you're trying to displace incumbents, any little excuse is a big hurdle for us. And I really want to be able to get the good take up, which also means that take up, but one of the biggest things is going to be cost. And the plots that you showed, or the tables you showed take up percentage, but that take up percentage is going to be a function of cost. It's kind of circular. Right. And so how did we figure out this cost that you have in the staff report?
Well, the cost was based on those assumptions we made of that table of those expenses, and the ramp up was based on kind of what Magellan, our previous consultant, was modeling for us. We kind of used their revenue stream model, and then used our revised expenses to build out those models.
But most of the expenses are fixed,
right?
Like staffing and things like that. And so if you cut your costs in half and double the number of subscribers, you'd still have the same roughly the same feasibility, right?
Do the opposite, right? Cut our costs in.
If you cut your charges,
Oh, got it. Yes.
cut,
Or okay.
and so it'd be different if we were paying a big residual to cable companies or something like that.
Mhm.
And at that point, then you can't cut your cost in half because you now are losing money on each customer. But if most of our costs are system wide as opposed to per customer cost,
Mhm.
then then cutting the cost in half, if that more than doubles your subscriber base, you've won. Right.
Right. I think.
And it all comes down to elasticity, as you mentioned.
Right.
Right. And this pricing is tricky. And I think it's me critical of the success.
Mhm.
Like Robert Phillips does a lot of this on UAC. Did he have any wisdom to share about the pricing strategy?
No.
Okay.
Sorry.
Oh, I'll have to talk to him. I mean, he's a big expert on pricing, but okay. So I would want to err on charging not enough.
Mhm.
I would rather go out of business with a whole bunch of customers than go out of business with just a few customers. Because then we would second guess ourselves. But if we can get the people to come over and they're just not paying enough, I can live with that more than the fact that we did all this work and no one signed up. That would be more depressing in my mind. So I want to really get the people. And also Magellan did some predictions about system profitability. How credible are those? If you look at their other predictions they made for other cities, have they come true or are they?
I don't know if I can speak to that. I haven't done the research. Sorry. I can get back to you though.
Okay. I think that'd be good data because if Magellan has a good track record, that bolsters the fact that this is a good program.
Okay.
And if they have a bad track record, then you start saying, well, are we making the right assumptions? Or did maybe the issue is that the cities that worked with Magellan didn't have a right pricing model. What did they do wrong? And not the fact that we're doomed, but what can we do different so we don't go down the same path that these other companies go down? So I think that's important to understand what Magellan predicted and in other cities.
Council member, just a couple things to answer, I think, a few of your questions. One, in terms of the UAC, you actually kind of hit where I think UAC generally landed, although there wasn't, I would say, full consensus in terms of, they really debated the intention of the pilot and what is the goal of the pilot. And I think the majority of them generally landed in the sentiment that you just articulated of let's see how many customers we can get and acknowledge that there may be obviously operating losses as a result of the lower revenue estimates, but we're really testing whether or not we could feasibly turn this pilot into a more sustained citywide, obviously, operation. So just to provide that context, that's long debate, frankly, but I think generally where they landed, knowing that, as Dave alluded to, that we have that check-in in terms of we're not going to go too far on the limb of investment without kind of proof of concept. So I think that duality was ultimately where they landed in terms of the kind of checks and balances of that. So hopefully that's a piece of helpful information.
Yeah.
In terms of Magellan, I think, and perhaps just intentional through or implied through your comments, but just to put on the record, I don't think it's necessarily just Magellan. I think what you're looking at is kind of generally also just fiber programs and how successful they have been. One of the notes I will call attention to is it does vary by state as well. And so, when we look at what, say, Magellan and or other, that's interesting, what other agencies have done, I think that the state regulations and the state success is the other kind of key characteristic to kind of clue in on, because I do think some of those are impactful in terms of This location. So whether it's in California or out of California in terms of other municipalities taking on these kinds of projects and the success of them. The laws are obviously different state by state, and so that does impact the success of the programs.
That's useful. Oh, I'm back on. Oh, I'm back on. Good. Yeah, very good. Yeah, crystal balls are hard to come by, right? And pricing is one that's the ultimate crystal ball. It's like, well, it's the optimal. We don't know until you know it. Yeah, you don't experience is something that you don't learn until right after you need it, right? Okay, and then you talked about marketing. Peer-to-peer marketing. I'm going to put a lawn sign up in front yard. I just have pellet to fiber, right? That kind of thing. Social media, that's all basically free. So the city posts regularly. We have them post a lot saying, sign up for fiber. And then finally, the Foothills ISP. So we're running dark fiber up there. Is that eventually going to be part of this trial, or is it going to keep that separate forever?
It's going to be separate for now. It's going to take us a lot more money to build all the way up there to offer ISP service. Right now, we're just doing the dark fiber. It's really more for our electrical poles in our facilities up in the foothills. It's not really meant to serve customers. So Doobie Creek's network is taking that dark fiber backbone and building out themselves, and they're investing it on their own to help serve those customers.
Now, there's a fiber through Foothills Park. What is that for?
We have some water reservoirs up there. We also have an AMI base station up there as well. And then there's a fire station. So for any kind of communication.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
It's connected to the fiber.
That's all. Thank you.
As we were talking about all these different scenarios and how do you really try to predict a lot of this, both in the construction costs and the uptake and the pricing. I just want to plug a book that actually the city manager is also reading right now that has become a real hot item. It's How Big Things Get Done. And it is certainly in the transportation project field, it's a must read now. But it's actually gone beyond transportation. It's the global expert on transportation mega projects, but he's really now the global expert on project economics and how to control them and why the vast majority of time they're over budget, behind schedule, and don't have either ridership or uptake that was projected. And by the vast majority of time, that's 98%. Which is scary, but we see it time and again. I mean, we're facing it on the BART extension, Silicon Valley. We had it on the Caltrain extension. It is, but there are ways to anticipate and mitigate risks more effectively than we typically do. And a lot of it is really looking at comps and then plan the heck out of it and then build rapidly, or the guiding principles are among them, and have a right team. So I encourage that. And in fact, he gets brought in all too often, not at the beginning to prevent these things, but when they've gone a long ways and things are going haywire, and to try and get it righted again. But it struck me that some of what we're struggling through right now is very applicable. And really it's all big projects. Actually, he's taken the model down to kitchen remodels, and we do the same stuff on that. It goes the whole spectrum. Okay. I did want to ask about the cable TV. Do we have any sense of what portion of the folks that we're hoping to bring on board really want to keep cable TV? And until we have that offering, we may not be able to get them as subscribers.
I think when Magellan did the survey in 22, I think it was like 50% had already cut the cord, which was surprising to me myself. And then there was another 25% who said they're willing to cut the cord. So there is a market out there that don't want cable TV anymore. And we hear that in the industry now, just the costs.
But how many of our customers that we want to get do want cable TV? If we're out of this uptake percentage, are we saying, oh, it's all the folks who are willing to cut the cord? We're only finding as our really obtainable customers 75% of the households, and then we get X% of those, and that we give up right at the outset a quarter of the households as potential customers. Is that how we've factored it?
When Magellan initially did their survey, we'll have to go back and look if it targeted this particular area, but they did it citywide, and I can't remember the response rates. We can look that up. But overall, the percentages of people who either have already cut the cord or willing to cut the cord were higher than I expected. And it's becoming more and more apparent because of the higher costs with Comcast and their programming, right? And also it gives you the flexibility because, as you see, most of the programming is through streaming services nowadays. So especially for the shows that are coming up. But in any case, we don't have that specific data on the pilot area. The fact that AT&T has a wide offering in that area and they don't offer streaming services directly, it's through a third party, that tells you that more and more people are willing.
But I'm just wondering whether we want to move more aggressively on that third party on cable as a partnership.
Something we have discussed internally as a city. We just have to be careful of referral to different companies. And so that strategic partnership evaluation is going to be key over time. We can definitely point them in direction of research and, options out there. But for us to recommend something becomes a challenge, of course. So.
Well, I thought it was really a question of who we would partner with.
Potentially, right? But that's another engagement that we'd have to walk through.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm worried is that is that something we should be doing in parallel right now, as opposed to wait and see?
Yeah. As we reach out to the pilot area, we will survey the customers to see what the reason would be if they didn't subscribe or so. Yeah. Good more data.
And Mr. Gupta made a reference to a $15 million savings to the community. Is that, do we think he's referring to what we had seen from Magellan for, whoever we had first in 2016 and then 2022 doing it, where they looked at nationally when you have a one provider, pricing's up here. When you have two, it comes down modestly. And in 2016, it showed when you had three, it dropped a whole bunch. But my recollection is that 2022 showed that third provider didn't have that same impact that they thought in 2016. But back in, I think it was 2016, that was one of the most compelling things to me was that, oh, so aside from however we do on our own business, by entering the market, we save our residents perhaps a lot of money. And I think that's important to not lose sight of. When our residents judge how valuable this is, those who don't come on board say it did nothing for me. But if we can show them that, no, it saved you money, then that's a whole nother story. And even back then, when we looked at it in 2016, that was kind of, well, that's an aside. And I'm going, no, that exceeded our potential projected profit by maybe it was 10x. And I said, that's the real number to our residents that should matter the most, but we have to explain it to them because they won't get it on their own. And even though the 2022 model, if I remember correctly, showed that it wasn't that as great of a value, it still showed a value. And I think that needs to be part of, it's not the marketing to get people to sign up, it's the marketing to tell the community what they as a whole are getting out of this.
That's great feedback. We can also track that during the pilot as well.
Okay, great. The replacement of the current backbone, when do we think we need to do that? How old is it getting? I don't know what the lifespan expectancy is.
I think we built it in 1998 or something, late 90s. I think most of it's okay, just for our parts that have congestion, just because there's so much demand. So those are the parts we are fixing. So we are just doing targeted.
So it's not a full replacement at certain
Right now, that's how we're doing it, but eventually we do want to build a whole new backbone or two of them actually. So that's the end goal. But right now with grid mod and the fiber to the premise project, we just don't have the resources to do a third large project.
Okay.
But we are addressing those areas where it's needed.
Okay. And then I think lastly, so we were talking about these areas of the city that are undergrounded and don't have good coverage right now. Is that, would we want to consider the medium high speed wireless as a pilot in one of those areas to benefit the community in a, they're going maybe going to be the last and most expensive to provide this to. And instead they could get a benefit right away at a fairly low cost and not as valuable as what we're providing with the fiber, but we'd learn how valuable it is. And I would add to it, I'm also interested in the role of that Wi-Fi for public Wi-Fi and expanding where we offer public Wi-Fi in public spaces.
Yeah, those are all considerations, of course. With that pilot phase is just getting us operational, whether we can offer the internet services as a whole and operate it successfully, and then we can add on these other services as well. So that the plan is just to get the operational aspects through this pilot, and then we can look at expanding different types of services from there.
But if it's these Wi-Fi nodes, I mean, we had that pilot that was done 2-3 years ago, and that was hooked up in a short period of time on Top Pier, Stanford Shopping Center parking lot, and I think the city manager's house as 3. And is not very cumbersome to do that.
And the last mile per se is not, it's the infrastructure, the data center that we're building to offer the services. So that's the core piece that is needed in order to do this. Currently, we're leveraging our own IT infrastructure to provide that service as a beta, but the goal is to get the data center up and operational for the ISP portion of the business.
Okay, I didn't appreciate that.
Yep.
All right. And I guess just lastly, I want to really encourage us again to consider in this pilot area offering one offering with a promotion rate and for a subset of that geography and another one without, so that we really get to see what works and what doesn't, instead of kind of doing things in sequence and not being able to do a side-by-side comparison if we do it in sequence.
Yeah, there's a reason the other ISPs use promotion rates, because they get the customers and then people don't like to switch. Yeah,
that's right. If it works for them, why wouldn't it work for us?
And that's the reason we wanted a range in that pricing to be flexible, because as you know, the market changes daily, right? You see advertisement from Comcast saying, hey, we're not going to change your rate for 5 years now. And so they're reacting to this kind of rhetoric as well. So again, that's why we need flexibility with the pricing.
Yeah. Okay. All good?
Yeah, I would just encourage you to really look at other cities that have done this and try and make sure which ones ended badly and how can we prevent that? And which ones ended well and how can we get that? So really study what other people have done.
So we need a motion, right?
Yes.
Yep. Copy in front of me with, can open that.
Well, the hard copy was late.
I move to recommend to the city council that we approve the new fiscal 26 Palo Alto fiber rates and packages as recommended by the UAC.
Second.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. That passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
For a really informative presentation. We had a lot of questions and you had a lot of answers.
It's also wonderful to see utilities and IT coming together. It's always wonderful to see any cross-fertilization of departments and to appreciate how you work so closely together.
Thank you.
Okay. So our last item is a recommendation to the council to adopt the fiscal year 2026 investment policy. Christine, welcome.
charges as well.
No, it's so confusing. I'm working on the landline. Give me a second. Give the slides. Just. Yeah, I think it works.
Thank you. Good evening, Christine Paras, Assistant Director of Administrative Services, presenting to you the 2026 investment policy. Next slide. The city is required by law annually to for the council to review and approve the city's investment policy, regardless of whether or not there are changes to it. Last year's policy included changes that addressed findings in the city auditor's investment management audit for broker-dealer review. This year, staff further researched industry standards for this, and we're including additional refinements in this year's policy update, specifically including the review of the FINRA broker check report, and also including a review of net capital requirements that are required disclosures by the SEC and give us a pretty good gauge of the solvency of the brokerage firm. So staff recommends adding these parameters to the broker-dealer review section of the policy. And we also added a couple other refinements that I think are helpful for us in administering this policy. Specifically, one of the items is that our policy is more restrictive than the California Government Code. And so we added language in the policy that says whichever requirement is more restrictive will take precedence. So that's the first one. Second one is we're also acknowledging that sometimes there may be changes to either the policy or the government code. And so if an investment is purchased at that time, then at the time that the current policy is in place, then it's exempt from the new policy. So say, for instance, the limits were different or the authorized investments were different and changed later, then they would be exempt from the current policy. And then one other item we noted, I think it was several years ago, that the state government code was updated to have quarterly investments be reported to council within 45 days instead of 30 days. So we're formalizing that in our policy. In addition to these, one thing we noted was we're also wanting to update the authorized investment personnel section of the policy. I think it's on page 9 of the policy. That we want to include a blended approach for management of our investments that leverages a specialized firm and internal staff. So that wasn't included on page 9, but we're intending to when we give it to council for approval. And we'd like that to include in tonight's motion.
What packet page is that?
Oh, 36. Thank you. And we found that this would align with our best practice of updating city policy and practices. It also aligns what we found in our research with looking at other cities and firms that they use, outside firms, and most importantly, also to anticipate higher investment earnings.
So you're saying that page 9, back at page 36, should have referenced something that it does not.
Yes.
So could you slow down and tell us, or for those of us who need to repeat, what is it? Because it sounds like it's quite material and you want us to include it in the motion. Do we have it written anywhere, like on a slide that we can see?
I can display it and send it to Francesca, specific language. Give me 1 second. Let me send it to you real quick. And then. Okay. Let me know when you get it. And if you don't mind going to page 9. The red lines aren't showing. I wonder if you can open it in Word.
So Christine, I believe what the council member is asking is in that what that was just displayed. Is that what staff is seeking approval for, or are you seeking an amendment to the language that was just displayed?
That is what I am seeking approval for. It's just the red lines didn't show when she opened it. Yeah,
I see.
yeah.
Version we have in front of us is the old version. There's been a, right?
Yes.
Yes, the version we have in front of us is incomplete. An update has been provided that is material, and we're asked to include in our motion. We just need to see.
Yeah.
What it is.
Yeah. And I think she just needs to open it differently.
And it sounds like it relates to the, okay.
And then page 9. And this should show, right, perfect. The red lines where, I made some grammatical changes to say treasury debt manager, but right here, it says and or designated investment firm to enter into investments with clearly specified parameters. So that's the first change. So we're adding in addition to the Treasury Debt Investment Manager, the Senior Management Analyst, which already is was in the old policy, adding designated investment firm.
Thank you for that.
Oh, no worries.
now
I wasn't sure if you had a follow-up to
Well,
that.
my follow-up, I presume you're presenting it as why?
Just to allow flexibility. One of the things we're looking at and was included in the budget was to bring on a specialized firm for investment management.
So that's something I'm not recalling. We had a lengthy set of budget talks, as you are well familiar with, and it's a big deal to bring in an outside firm. There's a reason we haven't had an outside firm to date. I imagine there was a sound reason. So I'm just really curious as to what's tipped the balance in favor of bringing on those third parties.
Yep, we'll walk through that. As Christine mentioned, it is best practice for us to evaluate and update our policies and procedures. And in doing so, as we surveyed other cities within the county, we found that currently 2/3 of these cities have a blended approach where they leverage city staff with a specialized firms that's really focused on investment and asset portfolio management. What we also found in that was, as we looked at just 3 of these agencies as an example, the yields on those are higher than ours, notably higher.
Even after expenses.
Yes.
Okay.
The basis points for these contracts are fairly low. They are like 4 to 6 basis points. So that's
Oh, yeah, that's
very low.
Yeah.
Right. So if you leverage the capacity of a firm just to get that additional 4, 6 basis point, you're going to get there. So that's what we discovered. In addition, in the audit we had in 2023, there were some gaps relative to just the risk of redundancy, continuity of service, some gaps with compliance with state law on reporting. We have cured those. But I think the ones regarding redundancy, continuity, those are very important. So we're hoping that this blended approach will mitigate those risks in addition to also the higher return. And as you may recall, we do have funds in our Section 115, and those are all managed by specialized firms. And so I know we went through a portfolio of a lot of material during budget. So we mentioned that it was included in our proposed budget. We want to align this document and this policy to allow for that and continue to stay current with especially around investments.
How much higher returns are you seeing in some of those other?
So the 3 agencies that we saw are 3.3 to 4.2%. Our yield in the most recent report is 2.6. So that's a notable spread.
Well, it's possible they took on more risk too, right?
Correct. So, those things matter. So I think part of some of the opportunities we'll have, if permissible, I'd also like to propose that the investment firm come and have 2 conversations with this committee. One is an introduction, talk about their background a little bit, get some feedback from the finance committee. Then, and certainly subject to council approving the contract, during the onboarding, come back within 3 months or so and provide some initial observations, some suggestions, and then kind of see how that resonates with the committee relative to initial observations, some best practices, even this policy. Right. And so that's kind of how I see aligning best practices in addition to the technical role of this committee as well. So that's my thinking through the 2026 work plan relative to this functional area.
And Director Lai, I think a piece that's perhaps missing for the public is staff is planning on bringing forward a contract on the 16th of June to support the hybrid model that Director Lai just was referencing.
On consent.
Correct.
And this is a contract to, what is it? Talk about the contract.
Sure. It would entail helping us with investment decisions, reporting, looking at our cash flow, helping us strategically look at the right blend of our portfolio in alignment with our policy. Because the policy has a lot of parameters and limits. It doesn't mean our current blend is the most optimal based on current economic conditions and forecasted conditions. So, so those would be some of the key attributes. They also have much more contemporary and modern technology, and so we'll be able to leverage that and be able to bring back to this committee a more robust report. Some of the things we'll also like to explore is, how frequent should that firm be having a conversation with the finance committee? Because right now we do the quarterly report on a much more casual basis. And so I think the first 12 months may look like a certain way formative, and then thereafter we could look at what does that support with finance committee look like. And so I think those are some of the opportunities we'd like to explore in this blended approach as well.
I guess my concern is this, I mean, it sounds like it's going to be a good thing based on the evidence we see in neighboring jurisdictions or whatever comparables you looked at. You know, their yields are higher. Obviously, we want that. But it's a material change in how we operate as a city. Like we're going to move from managing our own investments to bringing in this third party. So it speaks to what is the capacity of our staff and where are the gaps and, you know, what are the trade-offs here? And, you know, ultimately, how much money do we think we're going to yield from having made this change? And it feels that, I know you're saying we talked about it in budget. There are three of us here. I don't know if my colleagues recall this coming up. I don't. And I tend to have that sort of weird memory for the details that were said. I could have been spacing, but I'm feeling uninformed and surprised. And also that this, you know, the contract is coming before us on consent in 2 weeks. I wish that Finance Committee had had the opportunity to hear you present on why this might be a good idea, get our feedback and our concerns so that we can have confidence when we get to council that we can all stand behind it. Right now, we have nothing substantive to tell us what it's going to yield or why we're doing it. We just have a red line document that alludes to the fact of it happening. We seem to have skipped the step of making the case that it should happen.
Yeah, apologies for that, because I think the internal service departments on day 2 of the budget was really compressed. And so we went through it and it was kind of 2 long days. And so could have unpacked it a bit more. Happy to converse about it more now in some of those attributes. I think what's important for you as well as a committee to understand is, one, I've gone through this before in this conversion from in-house to third-party management. The firms that were the short list and the firm that we're moving forward with has numerous local California agency experience. I also want to reassure you as a committee that we will have them before you before we go through and do the actual onboarding, et cetera, et cetera. So should council approve this, we will do the administrative stuff, et cetera, with the firm, but we will bring them back, let's say in August, to have those initial conversations with this committee to make sure we set the table and set the expectation around, you know, internal controls is very important to me. What can we expect? And then the next touch point is probably in about 3 to 4 months after the transition of the accounts and the technology come back with observations and the work plan. That kind of feels right to me, because then it balances making sure the committee and the council addresses and gives us any concerns and that we're working in concert. How does that sound? Okay.
Seems reasonable.
So let's make sure we set that expectation with the firm to bring this back in August and have that conversation. Awesome. Thank you.
Do we have any members of the public who want to speak?
No public comments.
All right. Then how do we frame the motion?
I have some more questions.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Keith.
I do appreciate the conservative approach. You know, people like Orange County tried to be too clever and they got in trouble. And I don't think we want to be too clever. I'd rather be too vanilla than too clever. So I do appreciate it. It looks good. What is the current portfolio? How is it spread over, you know, just kind of roughly? Is it mostly treasuries? Is it money markets? What's the?
Do you happen to have the most recent quarterly report?
So as of the end of the third quarter of the fiscal year, our total portfolio is 656 million. About 37% of that is with U.S. municipal state debt instruments, 30% with agency, and my third biggest one is liquid assets accounts. So that's LAIF and a money market account that we have.
Okay. Okay, go through, one thing that kind of surprised me when I looked through this, it talks about maturity a lot, and I would think that it should talk about duration instead. Why is it talk maturity instead of duration?
Same difference. It's just the code refers like the duration of investment as,
But
yeah.
they're apples and oranges, right? They're tangerines and oranges, right? Because duration, there's a correlation between it, but not a one-to-one correlation, depending on whether it's callable, whether it's below or above par. So, but what you're really worried about is interest rate sensitivity. And when you talk about that, you would want duration. Are we required to call out maturity as opposed to duration?
We're not required to call out specific duration per our policy or the government code, rather the maturity of the investment, like when the investment matures.
Okay. We're required to call it the maturity?
So let me make sure I understand the question. The question is whether or not we need to use the terminology maturity versus duration. Is
Yeah.
that the question? Let us take that back because I'm
Okay.
not sure, but good to understand the question.
Okay, because the reason this calls it out is because, well, I assume they talk about interest rate sensitivity. If you talk about interest sensitivity, then the proper term would be duration. If there's some other reason that you want availability of the money, you want to guarantee that, then maybe the maturity is more appropriate. But
Great.
I would want to say, why are we specifying this? And if it's interest rate sensitivity, we really should be calling out duration. Then on packet page 34, they talk about the repo market. In the Great Recession, the repo market had problems. People walked away from the repurchase. And so there's no credit, the counterparty risk is not called out here at all. And I would think you'd want to, in other places, we talk about the credit rating of the bond issuer. But if you're doing a repo, don't you want to worry about the credit worthiness of the person who's doing the repurchase?
We can review that. And in all honesty, since I've been at this organization, we haven't invested in repos, and it's
Okay.
been listed here as something that, the California code allows, but we haven't been actively investing in any repos, but we can definitely look at
Which is
it.
probably a good thing. I guess the other
Yeah.
question is, do we want it on our list? And yet other things like commercial paper that's unsecured. Do we really want to have unsecured credit? Granted, it's only 180 days or 270 days? 270 days maturity.
Yeah, I think those are recommendations we can look at with our investment management
And this
firm.
may be why the investment manager would chime in and say,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are good ones.
Do we have any corporate paper right now?
We
Or corporate
do,
bonds?
and it is about 5.5% of our portfolio.
Okay. And right now, see, let me go. So if you look on packet page 35, when it talks about corporate, it says no more than 10% of the par value of the portfolio. So that means that the total amount of our corporate cannot be more than 10%.
That's right.
Okay. And so it says no more than 5% of any single issuer. And so you said how many millions is our portfolio?
I have 5.5%. Let me look at the
What was
report.
it?
Total portfolio,
650
600
million?
605 million was the total portfolio.
Yeah.
657,
So
yes.
that's about 1%. I would want to review that. Having 1% of your money in a single corporate seems kind of concentrated, but anyway, okay, that's something that we should, and they talk about agencies, and in the agency portion of it, it really limits how much callable. I mean, the danger with callable is that your interest rate insensitivity is now not symmetric anymore. Duration is great if interest rates are going down. Duration is not great if interest rates are going up. And so they limit how much callable we have, which seems reasonable for our conservatism. But when you talk about corporate, it doesn't have any callable constraints on that.
It does not.
Okay, so that'd be another question is why do we not have any limits on callable? We have it on agencies, and I would think I'd be more worried about callable. And then finally, in the very end, we have prohibited investments, reverse purchases and derivatives. What about bonds issued in foreign currency? I would think that we would not want that.
It's not explicitly said as a prohibited. It's not allowed per the government code.
Okay.
So, and we don't carry any of those.
Okay.
Yeah.
That probably would be reasonable to put in there, say no, because for example, Apple has EU bonds right now, and they have euros. And so you could have if you just looked at the corporate here, that would qualify, that would be a potential investment. And I don't think we want currency risk. So, okay. That is all I have. Okay.
Thank you. Those are good.
I do
comments.
encourage that we bring those back when we have that conversation with the firm.
Yes.
Okay.
Public comment, Chair.
There's no one on.
Oh, is there no one on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Chair, earlier you asked the motion, if we could have the motion to include the.
I move that we recommend that the city council adopt the fiscal year 26 investment policy with the amendment to attachment A presented by Assistant Director Paras.
Second.
All in favor? Aye, that passes unanimously. All right, and I think that takes us to upcoming meetings. Let's review that.
So our next meeting after July recess will be August 5th. And right now, it sounds like we'll be bringing back the investment firm for a conversation with the Finance Committee. Several utilities items.
It has been proposed that either finance start later or the Cubberley ad hoc start sooner. All three of us are on both committees. And so Director O'Kane has put that conflict forward, noting that staff will need a break in between, and we will as well. So.
Was it? Sorry.
So on August 5th, there are actually, I shouldn't say there's a conflicting meeting, but we've got abutting meetings. And so I think Councilmember Lithcott-Hames is just calling attention to a likelihood of needing to create some space between the two. So both the committee members as well as staff have a break. On the 5th, we are expecting to potentially bring back the investment firm, which by this conversation does seem like it might be a decent conversation with them. And I do believe we have at least 2 or 3 utilities items that will be coming from the UAC in their June meeting. Obviously, I can't assure that since the UAC June meeting hasn't occurred yet, but that's the tentative schedule. So you'd have 3 or 4 items on your Finance Committee meeting.
And one thing I can do is confirm that availability of the investment management firm for that agenda.
Assuming council approves it on the 16th.
Okay, on that note, we're adjourned.
Thank you.